In a faraway land lived a husband and wife who yearned for a child.
She dreamt of rocking a cradle, of singing lullabies, of watching a child take its first steps.
One day, the wife spotted a vibrant garden beyond their own, thrumming with an almost otherworldly energy. The wife's breath caught in her throat. The garden called to her, whispering promises of hope.
My love, I have seen the most wondrous garden, and within it grows a rampion unlike any other. I must have it, or I fear I shall surely die.
Her husband, overcome with worry, knew the garden belonged to an enchantress.
He would brave any peril for the woman he loved.
Under twilight, the husband stole towards the forbidden garden.
The garden was even more breathtaking up close, a symphony of colors and scents.
Suddenly, a twig snapped, and he turned to face the enchantress.
You dare trespass in my garden and steal from me?
Forgive me, great enchantress. My wife is ill and craves your rampion. I beg you, have mercy.
Very well, take all the rampion you need, but in return, you will give me what I desire most.
The husband agreed, his heart heavy with despair. The husband fled the garden, his heart heavy with dread.
He presented the rampion to his wife, forcing a smile as her strength returned.
But deep down he knew the enchantress never forgot a promise. The wife, radiant with love, gazed down at their daughter, Rapunzel.
She is perfect, our little Rapunzel.
A chill wind swept through the room, and the enchantress arrived to collect her due.
Please take anything else but leave us our daughter.
A promise was made, and I always collect my due.
The enchantress vanished, taking Rapunzel with her. The enchantress took Rapunzel to a secluded tower.
Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair.
Rapunzel's hair became a symbol of her confinement, a golden chain binding her to a life she never chose. Rapunzel filled her days with music, her voice echoing through the forest.
One sunny afternoon, a new sound drifted through the forest, a melody carried on the breeze.
Rapunzel leaned out the window, her eyes searching for the source of the intriguing sound. The melody grew closer, resolving into a jaunty tune.
Who could be out here, in my secluded corner of the forest?
A figure emerged from the trees, a prince drawn by the sound of Rapunzel's singing. As the prince approached the tower, his eyes widened in astonishment.
Hello? Is anyone there?
Who's there? Who are you, and what brings you to my tower?
Rapunzel hesitated, her hand hovering near the window ledge. The prince's request, though innocent enough, filled her with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had yearned for companionship for as long as she could remember, but the enchantress had warned her about the dangers of the outside world, about the wickedness that lurked in the hearts of men.
But the prince, with his kind eyes and gentle smile, didn't seem dangerous. He seemed different, and his voice, filled with genuine admiration and a hint of loneliness, tugged at my heartstrings. I don't usually have visitors, but you're welcome to come up. Just be careful.
Taking a deep breath, Rapunzel gathered her long hair in her hands and tossed it out the window. The golden strands cascaded down the side of the tower, shimmering like a ribbon of sunlight against the rough stone.
It's even more beautiful up close.
He murmured, his voice filled with wonder. He began to climb, his strong hands gripping the hair with surprising gentleness. As he neared the top, Rapunzel felt a thrill course through her, a mixture of anticipation and something akin to fear. She had never been this close to another human being, not since she was a baby in her mother's arms. The prince, breathing heavily from his climb, finally reached the window and swung himself into the room. He stood there for a moment, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, taking in the sight of the beautiful young woman before him.
It's an honor to meet you.
The prince stammered, his usual charm momentarily forgotten in the face of her beauty. Rapunzel giggled, his awkwardness putting her at ease.
The honor is all mine, but please call me Rapunzel.
And so began their unlikely friendship. The prince, initially captivated by Rapunzel's beauty, found himself drawn to her kind heart, her quick wit, and her unquenchable thirst for knowledge. He told her stories of his travels, of faraway lands and daring adventures, his words painting vivid pictures in her imagination. Rapunzel, in turn, shared her own stories, her dreams of a world beyond the tower walls, her longing for freedom and connection. She played her lute for him, her music filling the small room with its bittersweet beauty, and the prince listened, his heart aching for her plight. As the days turned into weeks, the prince's visits became a cherished respite from Rapunzel's solitary existence. He would sneak away from his royal duties, his heart soaring as he caught sight of the tower rising above the trees, a beacon of hope and beauty in his increasingly complicated life. With each visit, their bond deepened, blossoming into something more profound than friendship. They shared secrets, dreams, and stolen kisses, their love for each other growing stronger with each passing moment. The tower, once a symbol of Rapunzel's confinement, transformed into a sanctuary, a haven where they could escape the constraints of their separate worlds. However, their clandestine meetings couldn't remain hidden forever. The enchantress, sensing a shift in Rapunzel's demeanor, her once carefree spirit now tinged with a longing she couldn't quite conceal, grew suspicious. Her heart, long hardened by bitterness and possessiveness, twisted with a jealous rage. One afternoon, as the prince made his way through the forest, his heart filled with anticipation at the thought of seeing Rapunzel, he heard the familiar call echoing through the trees.
Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair.
But the voice wasn't filled with its usual affection. It was cold, sharp, laced with a fury that sent shivers down his spine. The prince froze, his blood turning to ice as he registered the venomous tone in the enchantress's voice. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. Something was terribly wrong. He crept closer, his heart pounding in his chest, and peered out from behind a thicket of trees. There, at the base of the tower, stood the enchantress, her face contorted in a mask of rage. Rapunzel's long golden braid cascaded from the window above, but the young woman herself was nowhere to be seen. The prince felt a surge of protectiveness for Rapunzel, a fierce determination to shield her from whatever harm the enchantress intended. The enchantress began to climb, her movement swift and predatory, her voice echoing through the forest like a curse. The prince watched in horror, his hand instinctively reaching for the sword at his side, but he hesitated. He couldn't risk harming Rapunzel. He had to find a way to intervene without putting her in danger. As the enchantress neared the top of the tower, her voice softened, transforming into a grotesque parody of her usual affectionate tone.
Rapunzel, my darling, I've brought you a special treat, something to brighten your day.
The prince, his heart pounding in his chest, waited for Rapunzel to appear at the window, but she didn't. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds.
Where was she? What had the enchantress done with her?
He considered calling out, but fear for Rapunzel's safety kept him rooted to the spot. The enchantress was powerful and unpredictable in her wrath. He couldn't risk alerting her to his presence, not until he knew what had become of Rapunzel. He had to be patient, to wait for the right moment to strike. After what felt like an eternity, the enchantress emerged from the tower window, her face now strangely devoid of expression, a blank mask that hid the storm of emotions raging within. She swiftly descended Rapunzel's hair, her movements fluid and graceful, and once she reached the ground, she vanished into thin air, leaving behind a chilling silence. The prince, his heart heavy with dread, waited for a few moments longer, but there was no sign of either Rapunzel or the enchantress. The forest, once a place of enchantment and promise, now felt oppressive, heavy with an unseen menace. With a heavy heart, the prince approached the tower. He placed his hand against the cold, unyielding stone, his fingers tracing the grooves and crevices as if searching for an answer to a riddle he couldn't solve.
Rapunzel, Rapunzel.
His voice echoed through the silent forest, but the only response was the whisper of the wind through the trees. Despair threatened to engulf him, but he clung to a sliver of hope. The enchantress, for all her cruelty, had never struck him as a heartless killer. Perhaps she had taken Rapunzel to another of her hidden strongholds, a place where she could keep the young woman isolated and under her control.
I will find her. I have to.
He made a silent vow, his hand tightening into a fist. He would scour the land, follow every whisper, every rumor, until he found his beloved Rapunzel and freed her from the enchantress's clutches. He refused to believe that their love story, so full of promise and passion, could end in such a cruel and abrupt manner. Turning away from the empty tower, his heart heavy with a grief he couldn't articulate, the prince set off into the forest, his eyes scanning the trees, his ears attuned to every sound, his heart filled with a desperate hope that he would find his beloved Rapunzel, no matter how long it took. He had faced insurmountable odds before, and he would do so again, for his love for Rapunzel knew no bounds. Guided by love and an unwavering determination, the prince searched tirelessly for Rapunzel. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still he refused to give up hope. He followed every rumor, every whisper on the wind, his heart aching with each dead end, each false trail. Just when his hope began to dwindle, a glimmer of light pierced through the darkness. Deep within the heart of the forest, hidden amongst ancient trees and thorny brambles, he stumbled upon a humble cottage. It was a simple dwelling, almost invisible beneath a canopy of ivy and blooming vines, but something about it drew him in. Perhaps it was the faint sound of music drifting from within, a melody both familiar and heart-wrenchingly beautiful. He approached cautiously, his hand hovering over the hilt of his sword, his senses on high alert. As he drew closer, the music grew louder, and he recognized the song. It was a lullaby, a song his mother used to sing to him when he was a child. But the voice singing it wasn't his mother's, it was Rapunzel's.
Could it be? Could she really be here, in this remote corner of the forest, after all this time?
His heart leapt in his chest, a mixture of joy and disbelief washing over him. With renewed determination, he pushed his way through the brambles, ignoring the thorns that tore at his clothes and skin. He had to see her, had to know if his heart wasn't playing tricks on him. And there she was, sitting on a rough-hewn bench in front of the cottage. Bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun was Rapunzel. Her golden hair, now longer than ever, flowed down her back like a river of spun sunshine, cascading onto the ground around her. She looked different, older, her face etched with a sadness he'd never seen before. But her eyes, oh, her eyes still held that same spark of joy and wonder that had captivated him from the very beginning.
Rapunzel.
He breathed, his voice hoarse with emotion, unable to contain himself any longer. The sound of his voice, a voice she had feared she might never hear again, broke through the veil of her solitude. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening in disbelief, and for a moment the world seemed to stop spinning. In that single, heart-stopping moment, the years of separation melted away. She launched herself into his arms, tears of joy and sorrow streaming down her face, and he held her close, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the sweet, familiar scent of her. It was a reunion born of love, perseverance, and the unwavering belief that, even in the darkest of times, hope could still bloom. And so they returned to his kingdom together, hand in hand, their hearts overflowing with love and gratitude. The enchantress, her powers weakened by the strength of their love, was never seen again. The people of the kingdom, touched by Rapunzel's kindness and captivated by her beauty, welcomed her with open arms. And so they lived, if not exactly happily ever after, then in a happily ever present, cherishing each day, each stolen moment, each shared dream, for they knew deep in their hearts that their love was a force stronger than any magic, a force that had the power to heal old wounds, mend broken dreams, and light the way to a brighter future.